Okay, so our next presentation is from the team at Aviva UK Life, as you can see there. So we've got Anne Chilton, who's a Senior Tax Manager, with Chris Caves, who's a Tax Systems and Technology Consultant, and Liam Nichols, who's a Tax Systems and Technology Assistant. Okay, and they're going to talk about practical applications of IDEA in the Aviva tax team. So, thank you.
So, I think I'm doing that. So I've put together just a quick agenda of what we're going to go through. What we're really going to focus on is specific things that we've done with Aviva. So we've used IDEA for various different tax processes, and so we thought it might be interesting to look at the detail of those processes, how we've done them, the automation that we've used, and that kind of thing. So we're going to do a bit of an overview of our team and the processes, and then we're going to look at a few different processes in detail, and then we'll finish off by talking about some of the things that we found from using IDEA in a large organisation. So this is how our tax team works. So Chris, Liam and I make up the tax systems team. I manage the work, they do the complicated coding and stuff. So we work as part of the systems team, part of the tax team, and very much work within the team, so that the processes that we develop are what the tax team need. And that was a conscious decision a few years ago, that we wanted people who knew about tax, worked with the tax people, understood the challenges, to be working within the team to make processes more efficient and automate them. So what we do is we work with the BAU teams to identify where we might improve processes, where it might be a good idea to automate them. And then we work with the BAU teams while we're developing the processes to make sure that what we're delivering is what they actually want and what they will use. I think probably like a lot of big organisations in the past, we've had projects come in, deliver a solution to a team, a whole load of consultants do it for you, and then they give you something that you don't actually want to use and it doesn't do the job. So by using this approach, we hope that we get something that's closer to what the BAU teams want, and then we can work with them to embed the process, to train the teams into using it. When we look at each project that we work on, we think about what application would be best for that. So we've obviously got IDEA, we use that quite a lot for a few of our processes, but we will also use Excel VBA. We have a robot that we use for the tax team. And Chris later on is going to talk a bit more about how we've used our robot in conjunction with IDEA. So we've just got one IDEA project which we've got the robot running for us. So that's quite interesting. So this is just a summary of all our IDEA processes at the moment. So we've got a few really big processes in there. So for the HMRC people here, there's some stuff around controlling and a lot about compliance and making sure our tax returns give us the right numbers. So at the top, I've got some tax return processes. We use IDEA for our VAT return. I'm going to talk about how that works in a minute. We've got some IDEA processes which we're very much using for controls. So this one at the end, called insurance premium tax exceptions, is taking all of our insurance premium tax data. It also brings in the premiums into IDEA, and IDEA will look at the insurance premium tax as a percentage of the premiums and then compare it with the expected rates, and it will spit out an exceptions report at the end which says these are where we've not got quite the rate that we were expecting. So Chris is going to talk about that and how that works in more detail later. Then the next one along, we've got capital gains tax source data reconciliation. So that's doing what IDEA is really good at, taking two pieces of data and reconciling them against each other. So we've got a capital gains tax system, and what we want to do is make sure that that data in that system is the same as the source data that we put into it. So that's a process that Liam's developed, and he's going to talk about that one. And then one of our other big processes is our corporation tax expense analysis at the bottom, where we are taking all of the expenses for IDEA and analysing so that we can work out what our disallowable expenses are for our tax comp. And then we will also use IDEA for ad hoc reconciliations and analysis. But we will go through all of those processes. So I'm going to start by talking about the expense analysis. And what we do each month is we take the entire expenses ledger data for Aviva out of the expenses ledger and put it, well, it stays there, put it into Aviva, into IDEA. So we've got all of the Aviva entities and expenses data in IDEA. We then do three things with it. So we do the corporation tax expense analysis, which is an IDEA process. We do the VAT expense analysis, again an IDEA process. And we also take a subset of data from that, which is all the employee expenses. And that then goes off into a separate process outside of IDEA where we're looking for any expenses that might be classed as taxable income. But at the moment, that's a separate process, but it's quite useful that we can get IDEA to give us that subset of expenses to do that analysis on. So, the first process I was going to talk about in detail is our corporation tax expense analysis. So, this is a process that we've developed over a few years. The objective of this is that we want to look at all of our expenses and work out which of those are disallowable for the corporation tax comp or which ones we need to do further review on to decide what the treatment in the corporation tax calculation should be. And the way that we do this, and one of the benefits is that we can do all of the analysis for all of the companies at the same time. So what was done previously is how you'd have different people from the tax team taking out the data for their company that they were looking at, and then they would be doing their analysis, and then somebody else would be doing analysis on a different company. And what we've got now is all of the expenses in IDEA, and we do the analysis in one place in a consistent way, and then we can use that for all the corporation tax computations. The really good thing about IDEA is the ability we can search on nominal code, so where things have been put to the correct nominal code, we can just pull out that nominal code and say that's a disallowable expense. But we can also do searches based on the description that's being keyed in when the invoice has been entered to the system. So if invoices have gone to the wrong code, but they've keyed in with a description that would be disallowable, we can pick those up as well. And that's quite powerful, and I think we struggled to do that before we were using IDEA. And we've automated these rules. So we've written IDEA script code, which we can bring in a data set each month and run these analysis on it, and it would give us the output split into the different sections. So I've put an extract from our IDEA project on the screen, and you can see that we're starting with our corporation tax. This is the expense data for the whole of 2018, and we've got 1.4 million records, and then that's been split between all the different buckets that we're interested in so that we can then do more analysis on it. This has taken a little while to develop. So last year when we did this analysis, it was all done manually. For the 2017 tax comps, we did it manually. Somebody used IDEA to do all the analysis, and then after that was done, Chris then wrote the code, the IDEA script code, based on that analysis, so that the macro could run it, and so then the time can be spent analyse the expenses rather than trying to produce the analysis in the first place. We've done that process once now using the macro, and we're expecting to get feedback from the BAU team to sort of to maybe tweak that process to make it better again. So it's a iterative sort of development, but each year we should get better at coming out with exactly what we need, so there's less manual analysis needed at the end. What I'm going to have a quick look at is how we've done the code for one of the items. So about sort of quarter of the way down, we've got 2 codes there called entertain and entertaining codes. And if I look on the next slide, we've got the idea script that extracts that. So on the left-hand side, you don't need to be able to read the idea script, but towards the bottom of the code, just here, it's saying there's 2 particular nominals we're interested in, extract all the data from those 2 nominals. And then on the right-hand side, about in the same place, it's saying, can you extract everything that's got the word entertain in the description, but is not in those 2 nominal codes? And then by bringing those data together, we should have all of the data for entertaining. So then I don't know whether I can go back. Yep. So then we do that for each of these headings, depending on what rules we need to follow. So you can see for projects, which is towards the bottom, we've got a line for projects based on description and the projects based on nominal and description. So we're applying different rules to get the different data that we need for the corporation tax comp. But using the idea script has made it a lot more efficient this year. And hopefully we'll just need to make some more tweaks to then improve it for the next year. The next process I was going to talk about is our VAT expenses process. Again, this has all been automated using macros, but this one is much more complicated than the corporation tax expenses process. But because we've automated it using macros, the VAT team just need to pull in the data to IDEA, run the macros in the order that we've set, and it will produce the outputs that they need for the VAT return. So the objective of this process is to produce a set of data with VAT codes against it. They're tax codes that are then used by our software that does the partial exemption VAT calculation. So for a company like Aviva, we've got quite a complicated partial exemption calculation, and we've got specialised software that does that for us, but it needs to know how to treat the expenses. So by giving it each sort of bit of data, the right tax code, the partial exemption software knows what to do with the expenses. And as part of that process, so where we're splitting the invoices between with VAT and with no VAT, anything with no VAT, we then look at going through a reverse charge process where we see whether the invoices meet the rules that should have reverse charges applied, and that gets a reverse charge tax code. It goes into our partial exemption software. That software then knows what to do with those reverse charges, and it will calculate the reverse charges on that data. So we've got the top section of that diagram. I think we've got 2 macros that run that, and it comes out, the output from that top section is the data for 1 month with all the right tax codes on it. We then need to do a VAT return for a quarter, so we use another macro in IDEA just to combine those 3 months data to produce a combined data for that quarter, which will then be put into the VAT software. That has made a huge difference to our VAT process, and I think this was all done quite manually before, so IDEA has really made this sort of process much more efficient than it was previously. And I think next we're going to talk about, Chris is going to talk about his insurance premium tax exceptions process, which is the one I mentioned earlier, where we're looking at the premiums and our insurance premium tax as a percentage of those, and looking for things where they're not what we would expect.
Yep, cool, thank you, Anne. Okay, so my name's Chris. I work for Aviva. I've worked there for nearly just over 14 years, and the last couple of years I've worked in group tax as part of a tax systems team. So talking about insurance premium tax exceptions. So as Aviva is a very big organisation, the insurance premium transactions are made up of 2.5 to 3 million lines per month. This sort of almost instantly counted out Excel as a tool to be able to do this, whereas IDEA can handle multiple million lines of data and work at a steady pace, doing all the calculations that it requires. So what we do is we get a source transaction data file, a CSV, and we can load a CSV into IDEA. We then want to basically do some analysis in IDEA, grouping everything into specific sections to look for any erroneous data, and then we can output that data to pass to the team so that they can actually do the investigation work for that. Okay. And what we do is we're doing the same thing every month. So what we've managed to do is we have written IDEA script to be able to produce the same thing month on month. So what this shows here is we want to call multiple extractions, do some appending of fields, summarizations as well, and then at the end we also do exports of the data. And on the right hand side that just shows, so we start off with one source file right at the top. That's September data there, has 2.8 million lines, and that is broken down into various different systems, and it shows if there are any exceptions. You get outputs like this, where there are records, or there might be records where there are no transactions at all. But we can basically do that every month using the same data or the same code. So it doesn't need to be anyone with actually any IDEA knowledge. They can literally go and run this data. And what we have done to sort of further that is we have a virtual machine. So this is robotic process automation. And what we can do is basically get our virtual machine to act as what a human would do. So they would get their CSV file, they would load it into IDEA, they would run the macro, and all the outputs would automatically be done. So we can do that using our robot. So all we need to do is basically put the CSV in a specific folder, and then the virtual machine basically checks on a daily basis to see if that CSV data is in that folder. If it is, it then automatically works on the data. And what we can get the virtual machine to do as well is to place everything in a file structure based on what month we're in. What we can do with our virtual machine is, this is the logic that the machine will use. You work out what month you're in. So for example, we're in November, and we're going to be working on the data a month prior to that, so we're on October's data. So it knows we're in November. This would base it into October's data, so it knows that we're in quarter 4 of the year. We're still in the current year, because when you're working in December, you'll be in January, so you'll be a year further on. So you need to work the year behind, otherwise you're putting it in the wrong folder. It creates the correct month, and then it will create the correct file name for the data. So once it's done that, it can then check that folder structure exists on the computer. So what it does, we've got a certain file location, and in that you've then got every month below that, and then, or it's got a quarter file, then a month of that quarter, and it just basically checks every directory exists. If it exists, it moves on. If it doesn't exist, it creates the file. So you don't even need to sort of preempt those file structures. It will generate them for you. So back to this diagram. So we've covered the first 2 steps there. So then the virtual machine will open IDEA. It then goes in and selectly corrects the appropriate project subfolder. It will do the import of the CSV using the wizard. We then tell it to run a specific macro that we've designed, and then once that's complete, it closes IDEA down, and and then it will send an email out to everyone that's involved in that project to let them know that that data's been run. So in Aviva, we're currently using concurrent licensing. So the virtual machine has access to one of those licenses. So when it opens it up, it can work, and it also closes it down so it's not constantly in use of one of those licenses. And then that's me, Liam.
Hi, so I'm Liam. I've been working at Aviva for just over a year now, and basically my job is to automate processes for the Aviva tax team. A lot of the work I do is on the Making Tax Digital for VAT project, but one of the processes I'm going to show you today is a process I've built for a person in our team. It's a simple reconciliation. It's run monthly. It was previously done manually, so it's taken a lot of time when the person could be using that time to, do what they were hired for and analyse this data. This process is done. It can be 15 to 18 reconciliations a month, up to 4,000 lines of data. So that's not just time consuming. There's also a risk of there being manual error or human error. So by automating this process, we not just reduce the time that it takes to do this, but we also make sure that there's no errors. So the process the reconciliation that happens is our capital gains tax data reconciliation. So basically we have our investment accounting system. Data goes from that monthly to our system called Equity, which is our capital gains tax system. And what we need to do is make sure that all the data that's in Highport, which is our investment accounting system, is in Equity. So the data that gets transferred, so what we need to do is make sure that the total units for each CDOL tax code is the same in each system. So CDOL tax codes are basically unique identifiers that are given to any stock or security that trades on the London Stock Exchange. Basically we need a quick, easy and reliable way to reconcile this data, and I've chosen the idea to build this system because it can easily and efficiently summarise the data. So there can be multiple CDOL codes, so what we need to do is have them summarised, so we have the total units in each report, so when it gets reconciled, make sure that the same total units are in each. I also use IdeaScript to automate this. So my idea behind this was to make it as easy for the user to use as possible. So I've also built a dialog box, which I'll show you in a minute. So the user doesn't have to go through importing the data, running the reconciliation manually, or exporting it. They can simply click a button and then select the files that need to be reconciled, press OK, and that'll run. And have a little clip which will show that. Okay. So I start, when I build a process, I start by running it manually. So this is the process that I run manually, and then I automated using IdeaScript. So firstly we need to import the files. So they can just open the file explorer, select the file, that brings it in. This data needs to be formatted and summarised. Sometimes when they come from two different systems, they can either come in a number format or a character format. So when we're reconciling, we need to make sure in the same format so they can get matched, and then then the reconciliation can happen. So this is for when the databases are joined. So it simply takes the two files, joins them depending on the code. Then they'll have the total units, so then the reconciliation can happen. Then we append a field, simply calculate the differences. Hopefully most of the differences are zero, but if there's any differences, this needs to be investigated. So this then needs to be extracted into a separate database and then exported into Excel for the user to investigate what the issues are. So this is the dialog box that I created. So as you can see at the top, all they need to do is press browse, find the file that they want that needs to be reconciled. So they do it twice. Sometimes there can be 2 files that come out of our high port system. So that adds another complication that I've had to build into this process. And then at the bottom there, they can select the folder to where they want the reconciliation exported to. So just show you a bit of code. So it's not too difficult to automate a process like this. I find ideascripting.com is a really good tool to use. They have a good tutorial there on how to build a dialog box like the one I've just shown you. So basically this is just a little snippet. All this is saying is once the OK button's been pressed, have the file names been selected. If not, it'll come up with a message box telling to select the file, and the process won't run because otherwise it'd just break. This is another snippet. So this is for the other buttons on the dialog box. As you see at the top, that's just a little bit of code. Just if they want to cancel the process, don't want to do it. Underneath, they're the browse buttons, so they open the file explorers. And then there's also to open the folder explorer. It takes a little bit more script, so it can call that bit of script down there. And then this is just the different stages of the process, which when the OK button's been called, it's decided that all the files are there, so it's fine to run. So it'll call each step, just the same steps as you do when you're using IDEA manually. Basically it's saying if there are, it imports the file. If there's a third file, which sometimes there is, sometimes there aren't, then it will import that file also. If not, it'll go to the next bit. And then as you can see, it sets some headers, does some summarising, some formatting, does the joins, and then does the appends the differences, and then does the reconciliation, and then exports it. Okay. So this is just an example of the data that I'll be showing you the demo and what actually gets used. So as you can see in data 1, you can see all the CDOL codes. So this is what needs to get summarised. And then also in data 2 you can see the CDOL codes, and then the other one is the total units for each code. As you can see, both bits of data are a bit different. The top one's got headings, the other one doesn't, so that caused problems, so I needed to put that into the process so it can automatically identify which is the right field, and then add a heading there, and then it can do the rest of its stuff. These are 2 completely different, they look different, this one has 34 rows, this one has 35, so that suggests that there's a duplicate in the data 2. Also 46 columns in the data 1, and only 5 columns in data 2, so it also needs to look at, it needs to be able to deal with both these kinds of data and then find out which bits of data it needs and then use that for the reconciliation. And then the output's just at the bottom there, so you can see it's found some differences. It shows the code, how many units are in equity, how many units are in high port, and the difference. Okay, so this is the video of it just to show you how it works. Turn the sound off. So there are just the 2 files that I want reconciling. If I just pause. There we go. Sorry about that. So you can see just at the top there, I've also used the ribbon and I've attached a macro to it, so it's really easy for when the user just simply opens IDEA, selects the little icon, the little shortcut on the ribbon, and then the dialog box automatically comes up. Also a little reminder there for the user. So here it's just selecting where to export to. You'll notice in a second a little message box comes up where the user has to press OK. basically what happened was our drives got updated, and for some reason IDEA struggled to communicate with our drives, and for some reason a little message box seemed to solve that problem. So this is one of the issues that Anna will mention in a minute. That with a big IT infrastructure in Aviva, these are little issues you can come across when the IT people do their updates. They don't necessarily think about all the systems that might get affected, so then it's left to us to deal with that. And then there's it complete. And yeah, see the reconciliation just there. So just to conclude, we use IDEA. I like to use IDEA for automating. It's good just for automating them monthly tasks, such as reconciling data sets. I'm sure that's a task that every business has. IDEA script can be really easily written, and using a dialog box can make it as easy to use for the user as possible who might not know how to use IDEA. It can efficiently compare any size of data, which everybody already knows. So, this can go as big as 4,000 lines, but it could reconcile data sets with millions of lines. It's simple to format the data sets to make them comparable. Ideascripting.com is the one to use for if you want to learn how to do it. Imports and exports easily, and as I said before, you can easily just add a little shortcut to the ribbon, so it's easy for the user to find the macro, so they're not searching through folders. And yeah, that's that. Thank you.
So I was just going to finish by talking about some of the things that we found with using IDEA in a big company. So there's the obvious one, which Liam's mentioned and Chris mentioned. We can use massive data sets. One thing we really like is the concurrent license model. So within the tax team, we've got a concurrent license. We can have a certain number of people using it at one time, but as many users can have it loaded on their laptops. So it means that Chris and Liam can develop their processes, hand them over to somebody else in the tax team, and then they can then run it without us having to buy additional licenses. It also fits the way we work in tax really nicely. So we're really conscious in the tax team about key person dependency, and it means that you can have one person running a process one month and a different person running it another month without having to buy extra licenses, because the licenses just will automatically sort of cap at the fixed number. And we really obviously like the automation, because it means that our team can develop processes, hand them over to the BAU teams, and they can run them by just running the macros they haven't had. So we have tried to give basic IDEA training to a lot of the people in the tax team, but unless they use it regularly, they don't really get to grips with it. So we can do complicated processes and then they can just run them and just have basic IDEA knowledge and don't have to spend too long training. We do have challenges. So one of our challenges is, our main challenge is about working with the IT team. We've got a massive IT team, a small instance of IDEA, and the processes that we have to follow when we work with the IT team can be quite time consuming. So one example of this was we tried to upgrade to the sort of latest software last year. So I came to the user group, they talked about the latest software. I said, that's great, that does some of the things, it fixes some of the problems that we've had. I requested that upgrade at the end of November. It went live at the end of March this year. We had to go through 3 rounds of testing. We had to get it signed off at various levels. We had to get it in their list to start with so that they could deal with it. So it means that we can't react quickly to changes with IDEA, and that can be frustrating. We've also had issues. So we've got our concurrent licensing software sits on a server. If anything happens with that server, it can affect our licensing software. It means that nobody in the tax team can get onto IDEA. We need to find the right person in the IT team to reboot that server or whatever needs to happen to fix that issue, and that can be a problem to us. So the concurrent license is great, but it's a very small part of all the software on a particular server and a very big IT team, and we've struggled with that in the past. I think that was all we were planning to say. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it interesting. I think we're done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.